This meeting of the Preservation Board is now in order. And let's see who's here. Commissioner Hamilton, are you here?
Here.
Alderman Kennedy, are you here?
Here.
Commissioner Killeen, are you here?
Here.
Commissioner Richardson, are you here?
Here.
I am present. Okay. That is 5 present. Has any commissioner read the minutes of December 18th? I have. You have? Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay, and those minutes are approved. Commissioners, take a look at the agenda. Do we have any comments or changes to those? Commissioner Richardson?
I need to recuse myself from item D.
Okay. Anybody else? Any other changes? Okay, then that will be our agenda, and Commissioner Richardson's recusal is noted. We have no preliminary reviews today. We'll begin straight with an appeal of denial. Commissioners, that means we're sitting in an administrative capacity, and I will ask both staff, appellants, those who wish to testify to affirm that they're telling the truth. If you have any handouts that you'd like the board to consider, or you want to put onto the record, give them to Adana down at the end. Okay, let's call agenda item A, 6306 to 28 West Florissant.
I'm Dan Krasnoff, Culture Resources Director, and I swear to tell the truth.
Proceed.
All right, our first agenda item, 6306 to 28 West Florissant. This is an appeal of a staff denial. So I'd like to enter into the record ordinance 64689 as modified by ordinance 64925 and ordinance 64832.
Clarify, is it a director's denial or a staff denial?
It is a director denial.
Thank you.
Additionally, I'd like to enter into the record the decision letter, the denial letter itself, the request for repeal by the owner of the property and the applicant, and a copy of tonight's presentation.
What was the date of the appeal?
The date of the appeal was January 10th.
Is that a timely appeal?
Yes.
Thank you.
And additionally, I have 3 letters of opposition to the demolition that I'd like to enter into the record and make available to the board. Okay, so the item at hand is an appeal of a denial, as I've said twice already. And I'm asking the board to uphold the director's denial because the building is sound by the ordinance and is a high merit building by the definitions of the ordinance. So let's look at the pictures. Here we see a picture of the front of 6306 to 28 West Florissant Boulevard. So here's an area map. It's an interesting area because Goodfellow runs sort of at a northeasterly angle here, and West Florissant goes at a southeasterly angle. They kind of make an X as they go up to the north. The building in question is this building right here. And the city line actually is across the street to the northwest, right there. The main character of the area, since we've got the map here, is that Florissant is a commercial street, almost exclusively in this area. And Goodfellow, particularly to the south here, is primarily a residential street. And you'll see that in the pictures. So here again, we have the primary facade of the building. It was built in the 1920s. It is a brick and stone building with terracotta ornamentation on it. This is where the entry to the Club Imperial was, which we'll hear a lot more about this evening. I thought I would show some pictures of some of the nice architectural detailing on this structure. It's a brick building with stone and terracotta decorative elements. This is a historic picture of the Club Imperial back in the day, as they say.
Back in the day.
As you can see, the building, let me go back to this for a second. The fundamental character of the building has not changed dramatically in terms of its architectural value. Okay, now I'd like to show the other facades of the building. This is the southern facade. These are pictures of the western facade. It's a rather long, almost block-long building, so I divided up the rear pictures into two sections. The picture on the left is sort of the northern end of the building, and the picture on the right is the southern end of the building. This is the north facade of the building. And now I'll show pictures of the, or the, not the site, the surrounding area. So this is the street that runs to the north of this property. This is Acme Street. You can see from this picture, it's a street of, I would say, 20s, 30s era bungalow houses and ranch houses. So now we're going to kind of turn to our right and look north. And if you see to the north, you can see that the character of Florissant, West Florissant, is primarily commercial in nature. And this is what's right across the street from the primary facade. You have a, it's actually kind of a nice aspect that the buildings across the street are at the sidewalk, as is the building considered for demolition tonight. So even though there are more single-story commercial buildings, they're actually not really set back with parking in front like you might expect this era of architecture to be. This is looking diagonally across the street. So in the foreground here is Goodfellow. And then you see another one of those commercial buildings that run up and down Florissant. This is looking sort of straight down Florissant. The building we just saw is off to the left here. And we're looking at the west side of the street as we go south. And then this is an image of Goodfellow as it goes to the southwest. As you can see, there are commercial buildings up against Florissant, but as you get down Goodfellow, over here you see the residential character asserts itself again. So now I'd like to show slides of the proposed new construction, and then we'll go back and go through the criteria in the ordinance. There's been some back and forth with the developer about what the proposal is, but this is the proposal that is being brought forth. It is for a single-story strip mall type development. I believe this is a model or an example of another strip center on the north side, and perhaps the applicant can speak to that in more detail. This would be a typical end facade on the building. And finally, we have a site plan, which shows, sorry about that, the building here, and then a parking lot in front with a couple of curb cuts. This area here is not part of the development proposal. It's a separate parcel of land. And that concludes the photographic portion of the presentation. Now I'd like to talk about the criteria in the ordinance. The first criteria, as board members know, is this part of a redevelopment plan? This is not part of an approved redevelopment plan that either calls for the demolition or the preservation of the building. The second criteria, and really the most important criteria in the ordinance, in my opinion, is architectural quality. As you saw from the photographs, I don't think anyone can deny that this is a very nicely designed building. It's 2 stories. It really holds the streetscape and creates a streetscape presence. It has terracotta ornament. It has brick and stone elements and multi-light windows that are done in a very thoughtful fashion. So the building itself, for architectural quality, is very nice. But that is not the real significance of this building. The real significance of this building is cultural. It's based on its history as a live music and dance venue. The building had, from the time it was built, a dance hall in it from the 1920s, but the real period of significance is from the 1950s to the 1970s. That's when performers such as Louis Prima, Bob Cuban, Ike and Tina Turner, and Chuck Berry performed there. There is actually a version of the Jitterbug dance that's named the St. Louis Imperial after this dance hall. And there were live broadcasts of shows of musicians and dancing back in the 50s and 60s when that was a popular thing. I don't know if folks have seen the movie Hairspray, but you kind of get the feel that was what that sort of movie was based on, and that show. So I feel like this is a highly significant cultural site. Not every, we had lots of commercial buildings in the city, lots of commercial storefronts, but not many of them had this kind of draw for musical talent. And to lose this building, I think, would be a real loss for our cultural history, as well as the loss of a nicely designed building. I'd like to talk about the rest of the criteria in the ordinance now. The next relevant criteria is condition. As we know, the definition of condition is a very specialized one in the ordinance, and that definition is, will the building remain standing for 6 months? And I am confident this building will remain standing for 6 months. The building definitely has challenges. It was condemned structurally on December 5th, 2017 by the building division. Often we have had owners who have owned buildings for years and allowed them to deteriorate. That is not the truth in this case. The owner of the building only purchased it last summer out of a sheriff's tax sale. So, and I did want to say that the applicant has supplied photographs to me that show the building does have challenges, significant challenges, but in my opinion, its significance means that there needs to be an opportunity made to reuse this building and see if we can retain this important cultural edifice for the future. The next item in the criteria are neighborhood effect and reuse potential. As you saw, the character of the street here is not one of our finest streetscapes in town, I have to say. Really what's significant here is the building itself and its history. I will say I do think the most nicely designed building in this stretch of West Florissant is the building being proposed for demolition here. So if this could be a springboard for future redevelopment along the corridor, I think that would be an advisable thing. I don't know if the current other businesses, not the businesses, if the current buildings up and down the street are going to draw a lot more development activity in their current design. Finally, I want to talk about the proposed new construction. The ordinance says that for the demolition of a high merit building, there have to be unusual circumstances that justify the building's demolition. I do not believe such circumstances have been demonstrated in this case. The applicant who purchased the building purchased it with this explicit intention of having the building torn down and selling it to someone else. The applicant does not generally do rehabs of buildings. Generally, the applicant purchases the buildings out of tax sales and then sells them to folks, and then those folks do whatever they're going to do. So I feel like there has not been a strong enough effort here to try to reuse this building. And I feel like it would be advisable for the city to come forward with the best options it has for subsidy and to make this redevelopment possible. Finally, I would just want to reiterate that this is a highly significant building, a high merit building, and I would hope that the board will uphold the staff recommendation, and with that, I will take questions.
Commissioners on the right. Commissioners on the left.
Structural integrity, good. Sound?
The building's sound per the ordinance. It has roof problems. That's why there's some standing water in the basement.
Yeah.
It needs a new roof, and there are parts of it that, because they've been left open to the elements, need to be reconstructed inside. But because this is a high merit building, I feel that the effort should be made to try to make that happen.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? Okay, thank you. The appellant.
start by showing the.
We'll start my way.
Oh, yeah.
What is your name?
Robert Vroman.
What is your address?
I live at 4105 Dressel.
And is your testimony going to be the truth?
Yes, sir.
Okay. I will give you latitude. If you brought people with you who want to speak, you may call them up in the order that you want to. If you want to.
Only gonna be me.
If you want to introduce anything into evidence, make sure Adana has it.
All right. I'd like her to pass out the statement that I handed her earlier. Okay, good. And then I'm just going to play this clip and then read that statement. And that is my presentation.
Okay.
And then take questions.
Give me a sec. Cross your fingers, I suppose.
To attend tonight, the future of a historic club in North St. Louis is up in the air. The owner is looking for approval from the Preservation Board to demolish the building and build a strip mall. News 4's Alexis Zotos got an exclusive look inside the club where Tina and Ike Turner used to play.
Emily, that's right. And the building on West Florissant and Goodfellow looks a lot different today than it did in its heydays of the 50s and 60s. And the current owner says it's time for something new to take its place.
We now take you to George Edick's Club Imperial.
It opened in the 1920s, but in the 1950s and 60s, Club Imperial hosted Ike and Tina Turner and Chuck Berry, to name a few. The dance hall in North St. Louis was the birthplace to a specific swing dance style named the Imperial. But today, the building is in disrepair.
These boards are safe. Nothing else is.
Robert Broman bought the building from the city last summer and plans to go before the city's Preservation Board to ask for permission to demolish it.
I am not a builder. All I do is buy from the auctions and then send it on to whoever can make the best use of it.
The building is vacant. A fire gutted much of it several years ago, and it needs a lot of work.
The roof is compromised. It leaks like a sieve.
Broman says the building was purchased back in 2013, but nothing was ever done with it.
Went back to tax auction in 2017. I was the only bidder. My opinion is the market has spoken for the opportunity to rehab this building. Nobody wants it.
But Bromer knows there are those that do not want to see a building steeped in so much musical history torn down. Bromer owns several homes nearby and says he would like to see the vacant building turned into something useful for the neighborhood.
I would be happy to sell it to somebody that wants to renovate it. If that person wants to step up, I would be happy to do business with them. The only person that wants to buy it from me, they want to build something new.
So the Preservation Board will meet next Monday to decide what happens next with that property. Live in the control room, Alexis Zotos, News 4.
Thank you. Hello. I am Robert Vroman. I am not a developer, a rehabber, or a gentrifier. Essentially, I run a real estate triage operation in North St. Louis City. The Sheriff Department advertises for sale each year approximately 2,000 parcels, which the owners have until the morning of to pay their back taxes, or else their property is auctioned to the public. This is cutting out. I personally inspect every one of these properties, which takes about 4 months full time. Roughly 800 properties each year are not paid off and actually hit the auction block. 80% of the offerings are north of Del Mar. I place minimum bids on everything I am confident still has retail value above the back taxes plus routine processing costs. I never outbid anyone. I buy only what literally no one else wants. I end up buying 20 to 50 properties per year. Some investors spend more in total than I do on one or a few obviously high-end properties, but no one else comprehensively combs this market or buys anywhere near my quantity. Every property that gets no bids is transferred to the LRA, where 99% of the time it just rots into the ground. Some 14,000 properties have matriculated to city ownership in this way since 1971. To date, I have bought over 150 properties from city auctions and moved 95% of them onto owner-occupant taxpayers. I've been the city's #1 buyer of last resort since 2011. 90% of what I do is salvage borderline habitable homes that have slipped through the cracks and get them back to their bare minimum intended purpose of sheltering local people at below market prices. I don't update kitchens or replace stolen furnaces. I only sweep out the garbage, change the locks, and post a for sale sign. The few commercial properties I buy each year end up with all kinds of different end users. I really provide only property life support, not property management. By putting only emergency stabilization work into each property, I maximize the raw number of buildings I save from the LRA. I have worked full-time in North St. Louis for 6 years, and I have lived near Natural Bridge and Goodfellow for 2 years. I'm heavily invested on every level in improving this community. This is the first demolition project I've ever been involved with. 6306 West Florissant is objectively in serious disrepair, whether it will be standing in 6 months or not. According to Greg Edick, who is standing here, when he inherited the building, it had been operating on thin to zero profits with rising maintenance and declining rental market for many years. After losing the banquet hall to a devastating fire, the cost spiraled out of control on a fraction of the income. Edick couldn't keep up with the taxes and lost it entirely in 2013. Hall of Famer Orlando Pace purchased this building along with about 25 other North City properties at the tax auctions in 2012 and 2013. Despite having millions in liquid capital, Pace did not begin to renovate the building, nor even ameliorate the crisis maintenance situation. The project proved too daunting, and Pace concentrated on his smaller investments instead. Pace avoided all further expenses on this building, including property taxes, which inevitably meant letting it go back to auction in 2017. I purchased 7 parcels at the August 2017 tax auction, including this building and 5 nearby Walnut Park single-family homes. Again, all for uncontested minimum bids. After paying for this property at auction, I contacted Orlando Pace's property manager, who promptly handed me the keys and considered the building a total write-off. I hired Steve Bowen, who has done numerous deals with Northside Commercial Property, to market the property. After 2 months, it was time for the confirmation hearing, after which the buyer must present to the sheriff an application for either occupancy or demolition in order to get the deed. By the time of the hearing, October 19th, still the only offer I have received is from the owner of Paradise Beauty, a chain of beauty supply stores all over North St. Louis, with one location at 5800 Goodfellow, which is catty corner across the intersection. This businessman has proven successful in a hostile economic environment. The intersection supports a variety of local retail and corporate fast food. He is confident that a new building will generate tax-paying business on this lot. He did not want to get pressed, so asked me to take point, fully exploring the demo permit process. So here I am. There seems to be a disconnect between what the Sheriff Department and the Preservation Board are trying to achieve for the city. On one hand, we think that because St. Louisans care about all their properties, we empower this board to preserve the important ones. On the other hand, every summer, the sheriff says, here's a batch of St. Louis properties no one cares about. Please someone, anyone, take them, even for just the back taxes due. The fact this dilapidated building has gone through the sheriff auction twice recently shows that, in fact, the only people left willing and able to do something with it are me and my buyer. After all the media attention, the only people upset by this proposal have not visited the neighborhood in decades, if ever. The only people in the community who have contacted me are 4 small business owners interested in renting space in the hypothetical new strip mall. I am not discounting the history this building represents, but all evidence points to this structure being past its functional life. I urge you to make an exception, and I hope that this situation establishes precedent that any property that goes through tax auction repeatedly should be given wide leeway in its next use, if not exempt entirely from cultural resources review. I am coming from the opposite spectrum of the market than the deep-pocketed developers you usually hear from. I hope to continue buying dozens more properties from city tax auctions each year that get no other takers and turning them all back into something useful. Thank you for your time.
Any questions on the right side? Mr. Richardson?
Yeah. So you are aware that this is in a preservation review district?
I was not explicitly aware of that. I buy all kinds of properties in all kinds of different situations, and I explore every avenue possible. I was not intimately aware of the steps involved in getting a demolition, no. And to address the point, I did not specifically buy this building with demolition in mind. I bought it just because I thought it was worth more than the minimum bid, and I was the only bidder, and then I have to do something with it. And the only buyer that came along since August of 2017 has been the Paradise Beauty guy that wants to level it. So that is how I entered the property and the initial strategy. So to answer that question.
No questions.
Questions on the left side?
No, sir.
Thank you very much. Greg Edick? It is a not uncommon condition. Tell us your name, Mr. Edick,
I'm Greg Edick, George Edick's son,
and your address.
2611 Kinnamore Drive.
Is your testimony going to be the truth, Mr. Edick?
Everything the truth.
Okay, what do you want to tell us?
Well, basically, I don't know about a fire. In 2013, I didn't know about a fire, and I had it then. There was a fire there back in the early 60s. That's the truth, you know what I mean? And when I left there, my dad left me the place. I left there because I couldn't afford, they needed a new roof, which he's right about that. But I couldn't afford to do it because I'm a musician. These guys are all my musicians. We all play with Ike and Turner and Chuck Berry. You know, we play with all these guys. You know, so I basically that's how I would like to keep the building. It means a lot to me. It's a nice building too. It could be fixed. The big thing is it needs a roof. You know, and basically, if anybody wants to ask me any questions, I'll answer their questions.
Questions for Mr. Edick on this side? Questions for Mr. Edick on this side?
No, sir.
Thank you very much, sir.
Okay. Hey, I could just say one thing. My dad would appreciate not to tear it down.
Andrew Weil?
My name's Andrew Weil. I'm the director of the Cultural Resources. I'm the director of Landmarks Association. Dan, I'm coming for you. I'm the director of the Landmarks Association of St. Louis, and I'm here representing that organization at 911 Washington Avenue, and I will tell the truth.
Thank you. Proceed.
I'm just here to provide my support for the ruling and the decision of the Cultural Resources Office. I think they're correct in all of their assessment and their interpretation of the ordinance. I think this is a very high merit building because of its cultural history. I think that unfortunately a lot of the sites that are relevant to the musical heritage of St. Louis, which is so rich, are in frighteningly short supply these days. Lost the Castle Ballroom a few years ago. The Palladium continues to languish. So I think that because this building is so important, it's really, I know that the owner has a bit of a problem on his hands, but at the end of the day, the ordinances that we have to protect historic resources are really built around buildings like this. So I think that Dan's recommendations are appropriate. And also, I think that the point about the sheriff's sale is somewhat relevant. But I also realize that, you know, at the end of the day, it's caveat emptor. It's buyer beware. You have to know what you're buying. And if you don't know what kinds of restrictions are placed upon something you're buying, unfortunately, that's on you. So I think it's really important that perhaps more information is provided at those tax sales, and anytime the city is divesting itself of property, just make sure that the people who are buying it know exactly what kinds of restrictions there are on it. But at the end of the day, I think that really is more of the responsibility of the purchaser and the potential property owner. They have to know what it is they're buying and how it's regulated. So that concludes my testimony. If you have any questions for me, I'd be happy to answer.
Questions on the left side?
No.
Questions on the right side? Thank you. Ron Els?
I can speak to Ron. He intended to be here today, but he couldn't make it for some reason. But
Okay. Keith Crawford?
I didn't wish to speak.
Okay. Alderwoman Boyd? Thank you for your patience and for almost saving me from security.
You're very welcome.
Tell us your name, please, ma'am.
My name is Pamela Boyd, and I'm the Alderwoman for the 27th Ward.
Will your testimony be the truth?
Yes, it will.
Proceed, please.
I agree with the gentleman that just spoke ahead of me, and I was sitting there listening, and I was thinking while people were talking, and I heard Mr. Edick's son talk in regards to the history of his father's building and what he did with it. And I'm in total agreement. If we don't hold on to our history, we don't have a chance, because North St. Louis, people want to label it as, you know, it's dangerous and it's nothing there, and it's a lot there. And I have reached out to people that lived in that area in the 50s and the 60s, and they talk about when they were young and they would sit in the back and listen to Ike and Tina Turner and listen to those people come and perform and have the power that that building had put within that community. And so I just think it would be such a shame to let that building be demolished, because we'll lose our history again. And how long will it be before St. Louis won't have the history that it needs to let people know what we stood for back in the day? This young man, yeah, he buys properties in North St. Louis. Doesn't do anything, he just buys them. And so how long are we gonna keep allowing predator real estate business owners, as they call themselves, to come into our communities, put signs in the yard, do nothing with the property, sell it to the first Joe Blow that comes along, and then we wind up with the nuisance because the people don't want to take care of the property's falling down. And so as far as Paradise, they don't have anything to do with our history. They have no idea of what Walnut Park was. And so I just think it would be a shame to let that building go. I did talk to Willie and told him that it is incentives to help with that building. I said, because we want to hold on to that history. But his mind is to do a strip mall. I'm sorry, a strip mall doesn't go in every black community. It's not going to help every black person. Every black person don't want a strip mall. But I think it'll be something in recognition to Mr. Edict to redo that building and have those pictures up in there to let people see what we did back then and how we enjoyed the culture of our music. Does anybody have any questions for me?
Commissioners, questions on this side? Questions on this side?
No, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Commissioners, this concludes the testimony before us. Mr. Krasnoff, do you have anything you want to add?
Nope.
Good, thank you. Okay, Commissioner Richardson, have you got a motion?
I move that the Preservation Board uphold the director's denial of the demolition of the Sound High Merit Building as it does not meet the standards of 64689 and 64832.
Second.
Moved and seconded, discussion, any on this side?
You don't buy buildings without doing
Yeah.
due diligence research,
Or you do and this happens?
or you do and this happens. But I'm pretty familiar with the building as I grew up less than a mile from it and used to ride my bike over in the area. So, yeah, no.
Alderman, we've talked about cultural resources before, and whose culture? Is this one of those cultural ones?
I believe that it is. Having also grown up in an area that lost things like that, in our area we had the Club Riviera, where Duke Ellington and Count Basie had performed, and was owned by one of the first black Democratic committeemen in the city of St. Louis, and the building was torn down, and all that was lost, as well as the Comet Theater. We lost that in our area for very similar things. So in this particular instance, we most definitely need to be both sensitive to and protective of this community's history. More so, we see other people's history in the city of St. Louis being preserved. And in this instance, we need to make sure that this has the same kind of priority that other areas get. Having a brother that went to high school with Tina Turner, and my mother went to high school with Chuck Berry. Important pieces.
I just have a couple of things regarding the purchase of this building. It's always buyer beware, like the one gentleman said. You always have to. I always tell my clients, you need to do your due diligence at these tax sales before purchasing. What you get, that's up to you. So just because there's one purchaser at the table, you know, I understand you're doing a lot that you said in the north side community, but you know, it's just one of those losses that maybe you just need to wait for the next person that may come on and take on this project. I wasn't familiar with a lot of the history, I would say, of this building, but I am familiar with this building in terms of I've driven past this. I've gone to that Popeyes right across the street several times. And
You know the minimum age to be on this.
I know.
I
I might be the youngest person on this on this panel, but every time I've driven past it, it's the one building that sticks out within those couple of blocks, if not further. So to see that building be demolished, especially knowing more of the history now, it would just be a terrible thing in my opinion. So those are my thoughts.
Commissioner Colleen?
No comments.
Commissioners, anything else? Okay, there's a motion on the floor. It's been made and seconded. This is an appeal. I'll call a roll. Commissioner Hamilton, do you vote yes or no?
Yes.
Alderman Kennedy, do you vote yes or no?
Yes.
Commissioner Colleen, do you vote yes or no?
Yes.
Commissioner Richardson, do you vote yes or no?
Yes.
Commissioner Robinson, do you vote yes or no?
Yes.
That is 5 yeses. There are no nos. The appeal is upheld.
The denial.
Correct?
Denial of the appeal?
The denial of the appeal is upheld. Yes, that. Commissioner Richardson,
Yes, sir.
do you have a motion regarding the other 3 items on our agenda?
I can only do 2, sir.
Commissioner Robinson, take over for that man. Step up and help that soldier.
Sure. I move that the Preservation Board direct the staff to prepare a report for SHPO that the properties, all of the requirements, the National Register criterion C for architecture, and as it relates to item B, A for education, and G.
Excluding Commissioner Richardson, who cannot vote on this motion the way it was made because I asked for it that way. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Oh, thank you.
Commissioners, we have no further business on our agenda. Do I hear a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Stand adjourned.
Mike, we can meet. You have plans on it.
You made it.